Well, hello and good day or good afternoon or good evening, whenever you see this video. um, However, this video will be here in my group, which I just recently changed the name. It used to be Reclaim Hope here, and I've just changed it to Codependent to Leading Lady. So today we are going to talk about 3 codependent behaviors, and then we're going to talk about how we can maybe transition them, transform them into 3 leading lady behaviors in our lives. So as a coach, as a certified life coach, I love coaching women who are struggling with these codependent behaviors and help them to transition and help them to see things in their life that they can now show up in the world as a leading lady, which will help strengthen their own relationships with themselves and then also the relationships with others around them. All right, let's dive into these 3 codependent behaviors, talk about them a little bit. My goal is that you'll find some kind of information or some similarities that you can kind of pull from in your own life out of what I kind of give examples of on these 3 codependent behaviors. And then we're going to talk about, and I want to offer to you 3 leading lady behaviors that you can exchange them for and what that kind of looks like and how that would look like in your life. All right, so let's dive into the first one. The first one I'm talking about here is unclear boundaries. So unclear boundaries, one thing I have found that with codependency, because we comply or we're reactive, we are like pendulums. We swing either really good at one end. So example with the unclear boundaries, we open up the gates to everybody. Like anybody can come in. Like there's no boundaries. I don't have boundaries. Boundaries aren't that important. Boundaries mean that I don't love people. So we swing it to one side that we let everybody in. And then situations might occur in our lives. And so we go ahead and swing it all the way to the other end. And now we're actually building a wall and we're telling nobody to come in because this is a boundary we're creating. So I want to offer you that there is a middle ground, that there is a space between, everybody's welcome to between nobody can come in at all. And I want to explore a little bit about that with you. So when it comes to boundaries, it's very interesting because I think sometimes we mix boundaries with demands that we might have on people or with requests that we might make to people, thinking that that's a boundary. And a boundary is something that's very personal to you. So it actually is only about you. So when you make a boundary, one of the things that I have found in my life is there's been times that I've made a boundary with one person and the boundary changed with another person, right? Have you ever done that? Have you noticed that you allow this with the one, but then not with the other? I want to offer that that might not be a boundary, that is more of a request or a demand that you are making on somebody, or you're opening up to other people in different ways. And it's not to say that you won't have different relationships. Of course we will. But when you're creating a boundary is all about you. It's not about the other person. And so when you make a boundary, it's going to be the same almost with everybody. There's not going to be a change with anybody in that. Because like I said, a boundary comes from within and from with you and how you view the world, how you see things, and what's okay or not okay with you. And so when you create a boundary, understanding that it all is on you. And this is why I want to offer that instead of having unclear boundaries, which is a codependent behavior, again, like I talked about, everybody's welcome to nobody's welcomed. Or there's that little gray area that I was just mentioning, is where we allow one person but not the other person, and we say that, but that's our boundary, when in fact you're either making a demand or you are making a request to that person. And so understanding boundaries is all about you and what you're okay and not okay with. And so with that being the case, I want to offer that instead of having unclear boundaries, you show up in the world with integrity. I think I totally, it's okay. So integrity. So instead of the boundary part, you show up with integrity. And why is it that I would use integrity instead of like healthy boundaries or clear boundaries? Because we hear that a lot too, right? So if it's unclear boundaries, then you just need clear boundaries, right? So I'm offering integrity because integrity is what you value and what you prioritize in your life. Integrity is doing something regardless if anybody else is around. So if you are picking up garbage off the ground when you're walking and you're putting in the garbage can and nobody else sees you, you are doing that out of a place of integrity. You want the streets clean. So you're picking up the garbage and putting it there because that is something that you value and you prioritize in your life. So that's how you show up in the world. So when you want to create a boundary, you need to know where you stand with your integrity. Because integrity, like I said, is where you show up in the world regardless of what other people think or say about you. And when you get really clear on integrity, then creating boundaries is going to be really easy for you because you're going to have that clarity of integrity in your life and what you value and what you prioritize and what that looks like to you. What are your principles in your life? And then that way, when you create a boundary, it is, this is my boundary. It's nothing that you did or did not do. This is my boundary. I don't attach it to what you did or didn't do. This is my boundary. And understanding the differences between that. Okay, so that is on boundaries. So if we show up with unclear boundaries in that code, we can exchange that and go for integrity and get really clear on what it is that we value and prioritize in our life. So that would be the first one. All right, the next one is comply. So what does comply mean? So we just agree with everything. Like, it's fine. I comply. I don't have an opinion about this. I am okay with whatever it is you want to do. And when we are complying, there is nothing wrong with not having an opinion about something, because there's lots of things I really don't have a strong opinion about. Maybe I haven't even done the research about it, so I can't really give my say on it. And so I'm okay with that. And it's not that I'm complying with it exactly, but that I don't have much of a ground to go on. So I could be inquisitive and ask questions and be curious about something when it comes to complying, or I could choose to self-discover for myself and figure out what I want to do on that end. But complying is where we might say okay to something, and then later on we have resentment about it. And that is also known also within the boundaries part, right? When I was talking about boundaries, from having a wall to having no boundaries. And so, right, so we let everybody in and then we get resentment. We get mad because everybody's coming in. Then we let nobody in, then we get mad because nobody's here to love us and nobody cares for us. So understanding how that works in your life when it comes to communicating is really important. So complying is us just saying, okay, sure, whatever you want to do, I don't care, whatever you want to do. But then having maybe resentment about it, or wishing we would have said something, or not enjoying the situation that comes up because I complied, and then complaining about it. Right? So then I'm like, that was so boring, or that was so dumb, but I had no input, but I'm going to complain about it. So we just comply. So instead of complying with things, I want to offer to you that as a behavior for a leading lady, we decide. So decision making. I actually did a thing on decision making, a blog on that as well. I've talked about that before. But when we choose to decide beforehand, before the situation comes, we kind of already know where we play in that, then we can show up in a way that is more of a, not just a confident us, but that is more easy to be around and relaxed, because we know what we want and we don't want. We know where our boundaries are and where they're not, right? Because we've decided, because we've come from a place of integrity. So we've already decided what is okay for us and what is not okay with us. And I want to offer too, one of the things that I've really realized as I've dove in with myself and with my own coaching that I've done as well, is that the more that I've decided and I push forward through with things, the more then things become more clear to me. So at the beginning, it's not clear, right? It's all jumbled up. But when we start creating behaviors and habits in our lives where we're showing up with integrity, where we're showing up with what we've decided, we start generating an energy that creates relationships that really mean something, that there's a meat to the relationship. It's not just surface, that it really means something, and that it is something that we value and is important, but we don't value at the cost of ourselves. We value as its own individual relationship, but not at our own cost. And so here we go with integrity and decide. So we start to just decide beforehand, which is really key, right? Because if somebody comes to you and asks questions, and sometimes you've never thought about it, you didn't have a process that kind of was in play, so you're not sure on it, but you're willing to ask questions and then just make the decision based on that, instead of just going, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Maybe you ask questions more about it. Maybe you go, well, what are we going to do after, and you just want to have clarity before you even begin and say okay to it, instead of just going, okay, sure, whatever you need me to do. You decide beforehand. All right, so the next one is reactive. So this one is a tricky one, I find, with codependent, because it was a tricky one for me personally. It was something that I was not self-aware of as much, and it is when people say things or do things, right? And so we become reactive to it. We start having cynicism, criticism. We are very much judgmental. We kind of show up in a way that is just very harsh and not very opening to people. And yet we want people to enjoy being around us. We love being around people. So why is it that we're showing up in this way, right? That's reactive. So when somebody says things to us, they say words, we make them mean something. And so we get angry about it. Instead of understanding that we have a choice of how we want to think about what they said, instead of just assuming what they said meant, well, they must not like me, or this was wrong, or this, we take it into a negative tone, and then we get reactive about it instead of just looking at the words as what they were. So reactive is a huge one. It's kind of like, and I said, it's like that sneaky one. We don't think we're being reactive. That's kind of like the other three. So the other three we talked about before this were, we talked about obsession, control, and denial. And those are three things that as a codependent we see in others, but we don't see in ourselves. And this would kind of sneak in there too, that reactive one. We think that they're being reactive and it's not our fault. We're just standing up for ourselves. So we get into that self-justification. Anytime that you come from a place that you are justifying your actions, that's a great time to step back and go, what's this all about exactly? What's going on with me that I am reacting this way? Which brings me to our leading lady behavior, which is, instead of reactive, we choose self-discipline. So we choose to be self-disciplined instead of reactive to the situation. So when somebody says words or does things, whatever that is, we have like that self-awareness, and then we choose how we want to respond instead of just react. We actually take the moment to sit back and go, how do I want to respond to this? That is a way that would be, for me, like I would talk about, would be a leading lady type quality, right? How I want to show up or respond to this situation. And so self-discipline is that willing to listen to it fully, even maybe ask more questions about it. Maybe they'll say some words and they're asking you a question, and you can go, I don't quite understand what you're asking. Can you be a little more clear on it? So you start showing up in a way where you're just trying to make sure that there's clarity, so you're not being reactive. You want appropriately to that instead of just getting angry with it. And so that is that self-discipline, right? So this is that self-discipline type leading lady quality that we want to explore for ourselves. So here we go. We've got 3 codependent behaviors. We've got your unclear boundaries, and we meet that with striving and creating thoughts in our lives and actions that we do that create integrity, coming from a place of integrity, that behavior that we want to start cultivating in our lives so that we're showing up with integrity. Instead of complying with things, we decide to decide. So we decide beforehand. We've made that decision. We understand where we come from with integrity. So it's easier to decide. Like, we know what it is that we're wanting in our life, so we can make that decision. Instead of being reactive to the conversation, we become self-disciplined. We maybe ask more questions. We show up with like sincerity, with curiosity, instead of with judgment and with criticism. We show up with self-discipline. So these are taking 3 codependent behaviors and transforming them into 3 leading lady behaviors. I hope this was helpful. As I said before at the beginning, I really want to add value into the world. I want to add information that you might find helpful. You know, take the tidbits that you gained from this, go, I never thought of it that way, or this could be helpful to me in my life. And that is the goal, is that these little bit of information each time I give a video, that there's something that you can take away to maybe help strengthen your relationships with not only all the people in your life, but most importantly, the relationship that you have with yourself. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in, and take care of you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.